It happened on a Monday morning just past 8. The kind of morning when ambition buzzed through the marble halls of Titan Core like static electricity, shined shoes clicking, ID cards swinging, espresso cups steaming with the urgency of deadlines and defense contracts. In the center of that world, the grand lobby gleamed, glass walls, chrome pillars, holographic displays whispering the future. And then there was her, Elise Martin, mid-30s, brown janitor's uniform with a faded name patch, rubber gloves, mop in one hand, disinfectant spray in the other. She moved silently through the crowd of engineers and executives like a shadow they refused to see. Her eyes stayed low, her posture humble, but there was a stillness in her that didn't quite match the role, something in the way she listened to conversations not meant for her, or the way her gaze lingered one beat longer on a malfunctioning LED panel. She was finishing the last streak on the glass elevator doors when the shouting began. "Somebody fix this," barked a voice, deep and sharp with entitlement. Malcolm Westfield, CEO of Titan Core, stormed into view like a Wall Street hurricane wrapped in a $1,000 suit. Around him, a team of engineers looked like schoolboys caught cheating on a test. The quantum drive console had crashed 5 minutes before a live demo with a military liaison from the Pentagon. Panic flared. Interns ran. A senior software architect muttered something about a corrupted node graph. Another suggested rebooting the mainframe. But none dared to act. Then Malcolm's gaze swept across the lobby like a searchlight. It landed on Elise. He actually laughed.
"You.
"Janitor. Come here." Heads turned. Conversations halted. Some stifled chuckles. Others looked away in discomfort. Elise froze mid-step. Her mop still glistened with floor polish. Slowly, she walked over, aware of every eye that now saw her, for the first time not as invisible, but as a joke. "You've been standing around long enough," Malcolm sneered, gesturing to the fried console. "Why don't you give it a shot? Maybe all it needs is a good scrub." There were giggles. Not cruel, just compliant, automatic. The kind that feared power more than they respected dignity. Elise looked at the console, then at Malcolm. Her mouth opened just slightly, like she might say something. But she didn't. She nodded, softly, and knelt down before the machine, inspecting the base panel with her gloved hands. A hush fell over the crowd. Her fingers brushed a cable, traced the outline of a heat sink, paused over the debug port. Her expression didn't change, but her eyes narrowed. There was something wrong with the architecture. A subtle flaw. But that wasn't what hurt. What hurt was the laughter. The way someone whispered, "Maybe she'll clean the bugs out." The way her name was never said. The way they didn't ask who she was, only assumed what she wasn't. She stood up, quietly,
And stepped back.
"It's beyond my scope," she said. Voice calm, controlled, a shade too steady. Malcolm rolled his eyes, waved her off like a stain on his suit. "Didn't think so." As she walked away, back to her mop and bucket, the lobby slowly resumed its rhythm. Engineers returned to their keyboards. The console continued to flicker. The Pentagon liaison tapped his foot impatiently. But Elise? She didn't just return to the mop. She walked toward the staff elevator, shoulders drawn, chest tight. In her pocket, a folded photograph brushed against her hand, an old snapshot of her with a woman in a navy blue cardigan. Her mother. The woman who once said, "You don't always need to fight back, but you do need to remember who you are." Elise clenched the photograph tighter. They had humiliated her. Again. But this time, they wouldn't forget it. The elevator doors slid shut with a hiss, enclosing Elise in a temporary sanctuary of steel and silence. The flickering lights above cast shifting reflections across her janitor's uniform, but her thoughts were still back in the lobby, each mocking laugh echoing louder now in the small space. She didn't cry. She never cried. Instead, she exhaled through her nose, slow and measured, and tapped a hidden corner of the elevator wall. A magnetic panel slid open. Inside, an old keycard, black, unmarked, almost forgotten by time. She slipped it into her pocket, like a ritual. Her fingers didn't tremble. By the time she reached sublevel B3, the mask was back on. This was the part of Titan Core most employees didn't even know existed. Long-abandoned prototype labs and archives from the early days, before IPOs and weapons contracts. Here, the air smelled of coal dust and machine oil. Lights flickered only when motion sensors bothered to acknowledge her. But Elise moved through the dark with purpose, as if she had built these corridors herself. At the far end, behind a sealed biometric door that hadn't been used in years, lay a hidden chamber of glass and steel. She stepped inside, removed the janitor gloves, and tossed them into the bin like peeling away a lie. The room came alive at her presence. Old server racks hummed awake. Holographic interfaces blinked into existence. A retinal scanner pulsed quietly. Access granted. Dr. Elise Martin. Not Elise the janitor. Not the cleaner. But Dr. Elise Martin, lead architect of the first adaptive defense algorithm ever commissioned by Titan Core. A name once spoken in white papers and military briefings. A name that vanished from records the day she refused to approve the reprogramming of her AI into an autonomous kill protocol. They had erased her credentials, erased her research, and when she refused to be silent, they did the next best thing. They erased her. The janitor uniform had been her camouflage ever since. But she hadn't stopped watching. Each night, while others slept in glass towers above, Elise tapped into the internet, reading logs, mapping behavioral shifts, monitoring internal memos like a ghost in the machine. She had rebuilt fragments of her old AI, piece by piece, under a new name.
Silent. Hidden.
She called it Juniper, after the tree that never bowed in winter. Now Juniper glowed softly on the console, awaiting her command. She studied the most recent logs. Something had changed. Malcolm's desperation this morning wasn't about a faulty console. It was about pressure, external, precise, and approaching. She saw traces of an encrypted backdoor protocol buried deep in the new system firmware. It wasn't just corrupt, it was planted, designed to fail publicly unless a particular key was injected remotely. A staged crisis. Elise leaned back in her chair, her heart heavy, not from fear, but from the burden of knowledge. She recognized the signature buried in the code. It belonged to someone she once trusted more than herself. Mira Chun, her former colleague, her only friend, and the woman who testified that Elise had falsified data, lies Elise never got to contest. The betrayal hadn't been loud. It had been surgical. And now, the betrayer was writing the script again, from inside Titan Core's highest levels. Elise closed her eyes. The past she had tried to bury beneath latex gloves and ammonia fumes was rising again like a tide. She had kept her silence for years. Not because she was afraid, but because when you watch long enough, when you see the cracks forming from beneath, you don't waste your voice on noise. You wait for the fracture, for the precise moment when truth becomes unavoidable. And then you strike. She reached for the comm patch hidden in her utility belt, modified, encrypted, off-grid. A single press activated a pulse beacon. Somewhere, far from Titan Core, an old signal blinked to life on a forgotten laptop in a quiet trailer in Arizona. A man's voice stirred, tired but alert. "You sure you want to open this door again, Martin?" Elise didn't blink. They opened it first. Then she cut the signal. No farewell. The mute servant had seen enough. The observer was done waiting. And for the first time in years, Elise Martin stood, not to clean but to move. Elise stepped out into the city night, the cold air cutting against her face like truth against a lie, sharp, cleansing. She no longer moved with the hesitant gait of a cleaner. Her footsteps were sure, silent, surgical. She blended into the crowd like a ghost dressed in plain sight, but inside, the engine of memory and purpose roared louder than ever. Beneath the hum of streetlights and the glow of Titan Core's skyscraper looming behind her, she walked 3 blocks west, turned into an alleyway no longer listed on any zoning map, and descended a crumbling stairwell covered in moss and time. At the base was a rusted door with no handle, no number. Just a single etching, barely visible. Only those who were buried alive know how to breathe in the dark. She tapped a rhythm on the metal. 3 quick, 2 slow. The sound of locks releasing was mechanical, deliberate, and personal. The door opened into a long-forgotten boiler room converted into a subterranean command center. The air was warm, laced with solder and old jazz playing softly from a vinyl record that had long since lost its label. He sat at the back, beneath a tangle of wires and screens. Jackson Riker. Once a defense contractor. Once a father. Now, a man hollowed out by truth and fueled by revenge. His beard was more silver than black now, and one hand was a cybernetic mess of joints and humming coils. But his eyes, those storm-gray eyes, still burned with the same quiet fury that once got him blacklisted from every government agency in the Beltway. He didn't greet her with words, just a nod. And that was enough. Elise dropped the drive on the desk beside him. Firmware implant. Someone inside is feeding the system a suicide protocol. This isn't sabotage. It's an execution. And Myra's fingerprints are all over it. Riker picked it up, plugged it in. His brow furrowed as the data unraveled across the monitors. She's trying to burn the old house to justify building her own, he muttered. Clean slate. Wipe the past, wipe you. Elise leaned against the wall, her arms crossed, jaw tight. She wants a war without conscience. She's using my architecture to build a machine that can decide who matters. And you're the only ghost left in the walls who remembers how the original foundation was laid, Riker said, almost with reverence. That's why they made you disappear. The jazz stopped. A silence filled the room. Not awkward, but sacred. 2 forgotten souls, broken in different ways by the same machine, now staring at the schematics of its rebirth. She's going live in 5 days, Elise said. Presentation to the board. After that, it gets deployed across federal systems. No oversight. No leash. No failsafe. Riker looked at her, the way a veteran looks at a flag that no longer flies where it should. You're not just here to warn me, he said. You want to bring it down. Elise nodded once. No theatrics. No fire. Just the steady weight of someone who had walked through hell and chosen to walk back for someone else. I don't want to expose them, she said. I want to outlive them. Riker smiled, the kind of smile that tasted like rust and whiskey and unfinished justice. You're 10 years late, he said, flicking a switch on the console. She looked him dead in the eyes. I'm right on time. The room dimmed as old servers sputtered awake. Blueprints, satellite feeds, internal memos, everything they had buried began to surface, like fossils of betrayal rising under light for the first time. Behind them, an old photo sat pinned to the wall. Elise, Riker, and Mira, back when they still believed what they were building was for good. Before ambition swallowed truth. Before loyalty fractured into silence. I've still got contacts, Riker said, fingers dancing across keyboards. Ones who still bleed the old code. They'll answer the call if it's from you. I'm not their hero, Elise said softly. No, he replied, not looking up. But you're the last person they trusted who didn't sell their soul. The plan was simple, brutal, and poetic. Penetrate Titan Core's deep vault using legacy codes Elise embedded years ago, inject a truth trigger that would reveal Myra's corruption from the inside, and make the board watch the Empire rot from within. But it wasn't just about revenge anymore. It was about restoration. Of honor. Of memory. Of those who had no voices left to speak. As the screens glowed brighter and the data danced around them, Elise felt something stir inside her that hadn't breathed in years. Hope. Not the soft kind. The sharp kind. The one that rises in clenched fists and midnight meetings. The kind forged in silence. The invitation arrived like a beautifully forged dagger. Elegant, precise, and unmistakably threatening. Elise stood in her narrow apartment, the sterile light casting long shadows across the cracked floor tiles as she stared at the heavy cardstock in her hand. It bore the Titan Core crest in shimmering silver foil, embossed with authority and arrogance. The text was minimal, cold. You are cordially invited to Titan Core's annual Visionary Gala. A line followed in red ink, personal, handwritten, unmistakably Myra's. We should talk. Face to face. Elise's breath stilled. This wasn't a request. It was a stage. A trap disguised as diplomacy. But more than that, it was a challenge. The kind only two people who once built a future together could issue to one another when that future shattered into betrayal. She arrived at the gala dressed not as a ghost, but as someone who remembered who she used to be. Sleek black suit, tailored to form, her hair pulled back into the braid of her old field days. No name tag. No disguise. Just the quiet defiance of someone who refused to remain erased. Titan Core's grand hall was soaked in light, glass walls rising like cathedrals of power, chandeliers pulsing with calculated opulence, digital displays spiraling data like gospel across the ceiling. Guests in tailored arrogance mingled beneath the illusion of progress. Every corner of the room was a performance, of wealth, of control, of futures promised but never delivered. And there, at the top of the staircase beneath a steel arch engraved with the company's mission, stood Mira. Regal, icy, untouched by guilt or gravity. Her dress shimmered like armor, and her smile was the kind that hid a knife behind every syllable. The crowd parted as Elise approached, not because they recognized her, but because something about her presence disturbed the choreography. Elise, Mira purred, descending the steps like a queen dismounting her throne. I'm so glad you came. I wasn't sure you still accepted invitations. I don't, Elise replied, her voice low, unsmiling. But I accept confrontations. Myra's eyes narrowed ever so slightly. Still sharp. Still brave. Still unable to move on. Elise looked around the room. The executives. The silent investors. The AI ambassadors. All watching with their wine-filled apathy. You built this on bones, she said, her voice just loud enough to reach the velvet silence. And now you want to baptize it in applause. Mira leaned in, her smile venomous. I built what you abandoned. You were the one who couldn't stomach the necessary compromises. You ran. I refused, Elise said, eyes locked. There's a difference. The air between them buzzed with unspoken history, years of code, nights of vision, secrets that had once bound them now unraveled into this moment of irreversible clarity. A server passed with flutes of champagne. Mira took one. Elise didn't. Walk with me, Mira said, already turning. They moved through the gallery wing, past projected renderings of Titan Core's future expansions. Mars terraforming. Sentient infrastructure. Neural citizenship. Elise didn't need to read the captions. She saw the rot beneath the glow. The faces erased. The data stolen. The loyalty monetized. Finally, they reached the inner chamber, a glass vault within the building's heart, lined with archived hardware and awards. At the center, behind biometric glass, stood a single motherboard, marked Elysium _1.0. Elise froze. You kept it. Mira stepped beside her, gaze fixed on the relic. It's where everything started. Our first successful sync. The code that changed it all. You used it, Elise said bitterly. Repurposed it into a weapon. I evolved it, Mira snapped. Because I had to. Because idealists get erased and realists rewrite history. Elise turned toward her. Then let's rewrite it again. A beat of silence. A flicker in Myra's eyes. And then, the doors hissed shut. Elise turned sharply. The biometric glass around them shifted to opaque. Her earpiece went dead. Signal jammed. Cameras off. The entire vault sealed like a tomb. Mira stepped back, voice cooler now, her words sharpened by betrayal. You brought a data spike into this building. Did you think I wouldn't know? Did you think I wouldn't be ready? Elise didn't blink. I knew. But I also knew you'd want to witness me fall. You always like to watch people break. Mira crossed her arms. Then break. Elise reached into her pocket. Slowly. No sudden moves. She pulled out the spike, not a weapon but a key. One she had encoded years ago, embedded with her genetic signature and a backdoor command. You forgot, Elise said softly. You may have taken everything, but the system still remembers the hands that birthed it. She touched the spike to a hidden node beneath the motherboard case. For a moment, nothing. Then a soft chime. Elysium_1.0 unlocked. Myra's face paled. You've just triggered a legacy failsafe, Elise whispered. In 20 minutes, the board will see everything.
Every override.
Every manipulation. Every false line of code you buried under my name. Myra lunged, but Elise was faster. She stepped back, sealing the spike inside the port, locking it again with a retinal scan. Game over. Myra hissed. No, Elise said, already walking away as the doors reopened and alarms began to whisper in the walls. Game exposed. As she passed the guests once more, none of whom yet knew the empire was crumbling beneath their polished shoes, Elise felt the weight begin to lift. Not because the war was over, but because truth had been let loose inside the walls of power. And once unleashed, truth doesn't knock. It breaks the door. It didn't happen with explosions or sirens or headline-breaking chaos. It began in silence, precise, methodical, and irreversible. At exactly 8:43 a.m. the following Monday, Titan Core's internal servers began to cascade into a soft, quiet failure. Not a system crash, but a calculated unraveling. The kind of collapse designed not to panic, but to reveal. Executives noticed first. Their emails returning errors, their dashboards flickering with unauthorized access logs. By 8:47, the board was on emergency call. By 9:12, the federal inquiry had already been activated. Elise didn't watch it from a screen. She walked down the same corporate boulevard where just a week earlier, a security guard had looked at her like a janitor with a forged ID. Now, no one stopped her. The guards looked at her with quiet recognition. The invisible kind, the kind that follows rumors of a storm no one can yet confirm, but everyone senses in their bones. At the building's entrance, Myra stood alone. No entourage, no press wall, no curated light. She wore black, no longer as armor, but as acknowledgement. Her face had shifted. Less polished, more human. More mortal. She knew Elise was coming. You made your point, she said, not as a CEO, not even as an enemy, just as a woman clinging to the final edge of control. No, Elise replied, her tone calm but unyielding. I reminded the machine that it remembers its maker. Myra scoffed faintly, but there was no fire behind it anymore. You didn't bring it down. You just exposed the cracks. And cracks let the light in. Behind them, reporters were gathering. A few employees had begun exiting the building, some whispering, some filming, others just watching. No one cheered. No one condemned. The world was holding its breath. I'm not the only villain here, Myra said. You think the board didn't know? You think they didn't build the systems that allowed all this? I just played my role. Then it's time they played theirs, in front of the public, Elise answered. They used my code to erase people, to rewrite consent, to sell dignity in packets. You took something built for connection and turned it into control. Myra looked down. And what will you turn it into? Elise stepped forward, her voice quieter now, but charged with something deeper. Conviction, not vengeance. Something slower. Something less glamorous. But something honest. In the weeks that followed, Elise didn't vanish back into the shadows. She stepped forward, not as a savior, but as a witness. She stood before the oversight committee, before the whistleblower panels, before the journalists who had once forgotten her name. She didn't dramatize or simplify. She simply told the truth about Titan Core, about Myra, about the algorithms that learned to profile children before they learned to write. And how it all began with a dream that was hijacked. The fallout wasn't cinematic. It was slow, painful, bureaucratic. Stocks plummeted. Contracts were frozen. Key architects of the abuse faced investigations. Some were removed quietly, some publicly. Titan Core restructured, not out of virtue, but necessity. And Myra? She wasn't jailed. That would have been too clean.
She was forced to testify.
Forced to face shareholders. Her legacy mutated into cautionary footnotes. Her name, once synonymous with innovation, was now whispered with unease in tech circles. She resigned. Not with a bang. With a silence that stretched across press rooms like fog. On the outskirts of the city, Elise returned to the places she used to walk unnoticed. The cafes. The sidewalks where she once mopped floors with her eyes lowered. Some people began to recognize her now. Some nodded. Some smiled. No one asked for photos. They sensed this was not a woman who returned for applause. One afternoon, she passed a young woman coding in a coffee shop, struggling with a string of logic that Elise could fix in seconds. Elise paused, offered a word, a solution, then walked on. Because this was never about fame. It was about course correction. About the right to reclaim one's name, one's work, and one's place in the world. And though she never said it aloud, the world began to understand. The machine remembered its creator. And the power that once erased her had been inverted.